was inspected by the leader of the SS himself, Heinrich Himmler. He, at least, was in no doubt about their attitude towards the Poles.
I know if I gave the division the order to exterminate the Poles in this area or that, then I would become a very popular man amongst you.
In the summer of 1944, the Galician division was sent to the Eastern Front. To face the Red Army, massing near the Ukrainian city of Brody. It was their first experience of full-scale combat. And it was a disaster. After nearly 2 weeks of heavy fighting, the division was decimated. Of 11,000 men who went into battle, only 3,000 returned.
After July of 1944, the division was slowly regrouped, and there was an effort to conscript people into the division, which included releasing people from Nazi concentration camps on the promise that they would serve in the division. And then there were people who were inducted into the division from various existing battalions and regiments and units that had been attached to other German forces. Men do strange things in war, and sometimes men do very horrible things. And they should be judged by what they did.
In August 1944, in the fascist puppet state of Slovakia, a popular rebellion broke out to gain independence for the country from Nazi Germany. German intelligence acknowledged that the uprising was truly popular and said that only a fool would seek to stop it by military means. But a week later, the Germans sent in over 40,000 troops, including 2 SS divisions, to crush the rebellion.
The Slovakian uprising was a savage, bloody conflict. Tens of thousands of civilians were killed. No mercy was shown on either side. If Ukrainian units were involved in suppressing the Slovak national uprising, it is almost inevitable that they were engaged in brutal, merciless, anti-partisan warfare.
At the time of the so-called Slovak uprising, the relations between members of the division and the Slovak population in general were considered to be good.
The division was, of course, definitely unpopular. I think there would have been all sorts of people within the ranks of the 14th SS Division Gallizien. Some of them were really only on guard duties, but they couldn't know what the other parts of the division were delegated to do. And the other units did take part in reprisals against civilians and the members of the uprising.
In Slovakia, the division suffered from severe discipline problems. One senior SS intelligence officer later testified, "The Ukrainian units of the Waffen-SS were very unreliable, often deserted, didn't want to fight and just plundered."
Burning, murdering, terror and reprisals. This was their craft, basically. But I have to say that we can also find exceptions among them. as is the case everywhere and in every army. But the exceptions rather prove the rule. In Smrečany, the Wittenmeyer unit from the division burnt down the village using artillery and mortar fire. The civilian population was driven out of the village, and 80% of the 120 houses burnt down. It has to be said that Smrečany was a supply outpost for the partisan movement. This is the reason why the reprisal was aimed against it, and it was in fact a cruel punishment for helping the partisan movement.
But very often the civilians didn't have any choice.
One day one lot would come and knock on the window, and another day another lot would come and knock on the window. They either asked for food or bread, well, anything, or some bacon, or I don't know.
At the end of October 1944, the Wittenmeyer unit of the 14th SS Division Galizien entered the village of Nizhna Bocha.
They stormed into the pub first and just drank there. And then they did whatever they wanted. The men who were there said that the soldiers who were interrogating them were drunk. It was obvious that they were not all right. And they banged on the doors very hard. And then my grandfather went up and they went straight to him because he was an older man. And they say, well, where are the partisans? And he said that we had no partisans here.
No tak, robili tu domową prehliadku, tak oni...
They were doing house searches, and whoever they found in the houses, they were summoned to go to the school.
But then in the evening they rounded up all the men into the school, straight away that evening.
The soldiers interrogated 5 people. Cyril Zahradnik was arrested solely for having a Russian coin in his pocket. He was 15 years old.
Those that were sentenced, they were kicked and beaten, and they were kept there till morning.
Keď skončili to, tak odsúdili ich na smrť.
When they finished the questioning, they sentenced them to death, these men, and they just shot them.
Zahradník, to bolo
Zahradnik, he was just a boy.
He called out for his mother. Apparently in school he cried, "My dear mummy, you won't see me anymore."
No taký
Such a desperate cry.
What did the child do to anyone? He wasn't even a soldier. How the child wept and cried. He was led from the school, led to the bridge, and from the bridge they were shot, so they fell in the water. They had no mercy.
It was horrible. It was a horrible feeling. You can never forget it.
Captured German documents confirm that the Wittenmeyer unit of the 14th SS Division Galizien entered the village of Nizhna Bocha that day. The documents say the Ukrainian volunteers of the 14th SS Division engaged in the battle fought excellently.
No a nakoniec partizánov.
They didn't find any partisans in the end. and our men had to pay for it.
The Slovak uprising was recognized and aided by all of the Allies fighting Hitler. Britain, the United States and the Soviet Union all sent military missions and essential military supplies to aid the rebels. And Allied aircrew who had crash-landed or who had been shot down over Nazi-occupied Europe were airlifted out of the country. But like the partisans, the downed Allied airmen were also hunted by the German forces, including the Galicia Division.
I have had testimony of a number of veterans who encountered Allied flyers during the operations. Allied flyers were captured by the division, or by divisional personnel. They were taken prisoner, they weren't maltreated by the Ukrainians, and they were passed to the military police unit attached to the division. Whether they were shot or not, I don't know.
I think it would be a mistake to make a blanket accusation against every man in the Galician division. I think many of those who entered its ranks when it was first raised were anti-Russian, anti-Bolshevik idealists. But as the division lost men in combat, replacements came from very different sources. Ukrainian collaborationist police units, guard units that had been guarding ghettos, labor camps. The Ukrainian division, by the end of the war, had become a rallying ground for all sorts of Ukrainian nationalists, fanatical pro-Nazis, as well as honest anti-Soviet fighters.
One of the collaborationist units which later joined the Galicia Division was the Ukrainian Self-Defense Legion. In 1968, Polish prosecutors began an investigation into the Ukrainian Self-Defense Legion and into one of its leading members, Theodor Duck. Duck was eventually sentenced to 25 years imprisonment for his activities with the Legion during the war.
I started an investigation to see what Duck had actually done. I proved beyond doubt that he had committed murders. He had murdered about 25 people or thereabouts. He murdered Ukrainians, he murdered Poles, he murdered his own acquaintances.
The Ukrainian Self-Defense Legion was recruited from Ukrainian nationalist partisans by members of the notorious SS murder squads, the Einsatzgruppen. In the summer of 1944, the unit was crossing the Lublin region of southern Poland when their commander, SS Captain Siegfried Asmus, was shot and killed.
As a result, after a short while, Asmus's deputy, Colonel Chichenko, decided to pacify the village of Klaniov.
One former member of the unit, Vasil Malashinsky, gave evidence to a post-war trial about the attack on the village.
It was like a kind of ecstasy. We burned, we shot, and we destroyed. I was shooting, and perhaps I set fire to things. I don't remember if I shot anybody. We didn't go into houses because they were already burning. I saw the bodies of men, women, and children. We didn't leave anybody alive.
"44 civilians, mainly old people and children, fell victim to the Legion in Klaniov that day. Some were just 3 years old. After the murders in Klaniov, Duck's unit went on to kill another 105 people in the village of Skaldmierz.
Partisan warfare by its very nature means that civilians can find themselves in an active role, as the Americans found out to their great cost in Vietnam.
But they can also be innocent bystanders.
They can be innocent bystanders. Who's to say which they are in the heat of the moment?
Are there people from the Self-Defence Legion still in Britain today?
Yes. There are people from the Self-Defence Legion living in Britain today.
It is beyond dispute that it was involved in the pacification of Kleniov. It is beyond dispute that it was involved in the pacification of Skalmbierz. And it is in no doubt whatsoever that the Ukrainian Self-Defence Legion took part in suppressing the Warsaw Uprising. This is obvious, beyond any dispute.
Leichte Flak beschießt ein Beobachtungsnest auf einem Turm.
It was a ferocious, merciless conflict. Warsaw was pretty much razed to the ground. It was one of the most barbaric moments of the Second World War. Surviving members of the division who came to Britain, who settled here, always strenuously denied that any of the members of the unit had had any involvement in the suppression of the Warsaw Uprising. If there is evidence of that, it completely shatters the story that they have perpetuated.
This unit roster of the Ukrainian Self-Defense Legion confirms that they saw action fighting for the Germans in Warsaw. 3 months later, Theodor Duck and the Self-Defense Legion joined the SS Division Gallizien. In 1945, they surrendered to the British Army in Austria.